Welcome to the Scottish Paranormal Podcast. I'm your host Chris, and here we'll be delving into the multitude of strange occurrences that happen within Scotland. You can contact us with your accounts at the Scottish Paranormal Podcast at gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Podbean, and contact us by either means. Tonight's episode, we're interviewing Ron Halliday. Ron is a graduate of Stirling and Edinburgh Universities. He's been investigating the paranormal for over 40 years. He was a founder and chairman of the Scottish Earth Mysteries Research. He's written several books on the topic and been in numerous television and radio programmes, including BBC Newsnight. For a number of years, he wrote the X-Files column in the Glasgow Evening Times, and his books, which can be found on Amazon, include UFOs, the Scottish Dimension, McX, Scotland's X-Files, UFO Scotland, the A to Z of Paranormal Scotland, Evil Scotland, Haunted Glasgow, Edinburgh After Dark, Famous Scots and Supernatural, Mysteries of the Scottish Landscape, and his most recent book, Alien Spirits. As I said, all these books can be found on Amazon. I'd just also like to thank Ron again for taking his time out to do the interview. So find a quiet space, plug yourself in, get a cup of tea, maybe a wee beer, chill out and listen in. So this is Ron Halliday, paranormal investigator for over 40 years now.
Yeah, 40 years, yeah, afraid so.
Obviously, like, the paranormal within Scotland, what can he got you in the paranormal at the start? I mean, was it from a young age, or was it from an older age, or what can he got you into it yourself?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was from a young age, you know. My grandmother, she came from up north, up Aberdeen way, and she was interested in spirits. In fact, she was somebody who said she could see the spirits of the dead, you know. Mm-hmm. And she'd see them walking around the house, and you know, which wasn't very reassuring if you're of a nervous kind of disposition, you know. Mm-hmm. But she was interested, and you know, she did some kind of spiritualist reading sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I had that from one side. My dad, he was a scientist, but he was interested in what was psychical research, you know, actually interested in what people were kind of testing as psychic phenomena to see, you know, if they could get any, you know, like telepathy and stuff like that. So I kind of got it from both sides. So yeah, and there was various books around the house when I was a kid. I read, you know, some of them and kind of frightened myself, you know. But I kind of got into it in that way, and the interest never left me.
So it seems like it's been a bit of an education as well, coming through at an early age.
Yeah, definitely an education, you know.
Do you think, being into the paranormal for that long, do you see a change? Have you seen a change in the beliefs of people in the paranormal, and gone back to obviously like your grandmother's days, and even kind of coming through now, and you see people try to put like a scientific slant in it now, and there's more things. Basically, there's a lot more electronic equipment where you can find things and you can see things, and even some things validate things. You know what I mean? Do you see a difference between the perception of people between then and now?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard to be sure, you know, but I mean, obviously there's been a long-standing interest in certain aspects of the paranormal, you know, stretching back. Obviously, people have been seeing ghosts and, you know, odd objects in the sky, you know, for hundreds of years. But I mean, I think, you know, there was an attempt, I mean, even during the 19th century, the Society for Psychical Research, you know, there was an attempt to kind of measure psychic phenomena or measure ghostly activity. I mean, you know, they did try to use instruments then. I think, obviously, instruments have got a bit more sophisticated, you know, in the modern era. But I mean, I don't know if people's attitudes have changed in the sense that I think a lot of people are still convinced they've seen ghosts. You know, a lot of people convinced that, you know, ghosts don't exist. I think it is fair to say that Nobody's come up with any 100% definite proof that there are such things as ghosts, or, for example, that aliens are visiting us from another planet. So, I mean, I think there's always going to be a bit of debate in terms of what people are actually experiencing when they see things which, seem kind of, well, to put it bluntly, supernatural.
These days, and I say these days, but like these kind of ideas go even like back a lot further as well, where it's some people's belief that, like, regardless of what time frame they were in, that like ghost sightings and spiritualism and UFOs and they're all kind of separate, cryptid stuff like that. It's all kind of separate entities, and you're getting the ideas that I'd say maybe these days. I mean, people are coming up with that it's all kind of linked together, but even when you go back to quite a lot of stuff in the past, even some people in the past linked a lot of this kind of phenomenon together and put it in just like the one basket. What's your kind of view on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it seems like these, things which seem on the surface different, you do think, probably could be connected in some way, though the connection's not easy to see, except in the fact that there's some things that seem, if you like, things that seem to defy not just common sense, but sometimes the physical laws of nature. So, I mean, I think, there must be some connection between them all. I mean, if you take people's UFO sightings, sometimes these seem quite quick, they're over in a short space of time. Sometimes people see spacecraft that they can actually kind of see through, the same way that people see through ghosts, but ghosts can appear solid, UFOs can appear solid. So I think there's some kind of connection there. I mean, and the connection might be that people are seeing things from other worlds or other dimensions, and this explains why you get these sightings of all kinds of strange things. Mm-hmm. And the scientists, say there are potentially some scientists, which is always controversial, obviously, some of this stuff always is, but some scientists certainly argue that there are multi-universes, so there are, our universe exists in conjunction with lots of other universes, and possibly people are seeing into other universes, other worlds, at different periods of their development, which does seem, very strange, but, it's a possible explanation.
I think as well as you get, and again, regardless of kind of what time frame, it's sometimes it could be somebody's either what the beliefs they've got that they may perceive that certain phenomenon to be that certain thing to them. You know what I mean? So if somebody thinks it's a, let's say they're highly religious, they might think it's an angel, and then somebody else might perceive it to be like an alien or a UFO or whatever else. But there's so much evidence out there that all this kind of phenomenon is out there. Over the last over like 40 years, you've been investigating the paranormal. You must have seen some sites, investigated some cases, and heard some stories. And what's been the most in your terms, what kind of you've seen within your time within either like Scotland? What's been the kind of most cases that's perplexed you the most, or kind of you thought was like the ones that stand out with either evidence or perplexing you, that was there?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of cases that are perplexing because, in the sense that, they defy common sense and are very, very hard to explain. I'll recount one which is one that's always intrigued me because it kind of involves kind of strange conjunction of events. And this involved a 10-year-old girl. She was living on a farm in the country out in Perthshire way, and she used to walk into the woods near her house. And this day she walked into the woods, and as she was walking through the woods, she came across this group of small blue men, and they looked at her, and she was actually frozen to the spot. She couldn't move. The next event she experienced was a beam of light coming down, and then she was lifted up into what seemed like a spacecraft. And here she was sort of briefly examined, or seemed brief to her. And then she was actually beamed back down into the woods. When she got back down on the ground, she got the power back into her legs and she ran home. Mm-hmm. When she got home, and she thought she'd only been away for a short time, but it turned out her parents had been out looking for her. In fact, were on the point of calling the police because she'd been away for hours. Mm-hmm. And after that, she was unwell for a few days. What fascinates me is that combination of what you might call traditional, almost folklore event, somebody going into the woods and being confronted by sort of small blue beings. When I say blue in Scotland was actually the colour of the supernatural rather than green, which is what we tend to think today. So blue is the colour of the supernatural. So she met these blue beings, and then she's taken up what seemed like a spacecraft. So, I mean, it's a very strange combination of events which kind of makes you think, well, what's going on there? How come somebody has that, if you like, crossover experience? And now this person turned out, she eventually became a social worker, and this experience, absolutely never left her. And of course, it was difficult, because of what kind of work she got into to talk about it, So, I mean, her story was very believable in terms of what she experienced, but how you explain it in terms of our understanding of how the world works, that's a lot harder.
Going with the cases like that, you mentioned folklore there, and you look through history, you know what I mean, and you've got, even in like mainland UK, and you've got like in Europe, I mean, you've got all the cases of the Fae and stuff like that, and it's the same, as I was saying earlier on, it's like the same type of phenomenon, but it's a different time period and they're seeing different things, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's always been there. They're always living there, like just with the bandwidth of what people can normally see.
Yeah, I mean, and people do, still see, fairies or nature spirits, whatever you want to call them. I mean, up until the present day, I mean, in recent times, in the last few years, I mean, people claim to have seen fairies. So, I mean, and of other nature type spirits, So, I mean, it is a continuing, if you like, phenomenon, but one that's sort of like being pushed back a bit. I think people are a bit more reluctant to talk about having seen, those kind of beings, whereas they're willing to talk about having seen a UFO because that seems like up to date and technical. But saying, I saw a fairy run along the road, that's something that people find a little more difficult to own up to. But I mean, these things can be quite disturbing. I mean, there was a chap I was interviewed, and they went to see where he'd had this experience, who, when he was taking his dog out, he saw what turned out, because it ran right up to him, turned out to be something which looked like a goblin. It was like a small goblin height, and he said it was sort of black, had a black sort of leathery kind of skin on, and he said, just stood there and looked at him, then ran off. And this guy was an engineer, and he was, really quite shaken by this experience because he couldn't understand, how he could see anything like that. It just seemed so out of his normal parameter of belief. And he was really quite disturbed and spent a lot of time trying to, come to terms with having an experience like that. So, I mean, these experiences, some people find the experience pleasurable, or interesting. Other people find it disturbing. So, I mean, these things can affect people in different ways.
Definitely. I mean, and that's it. It's like that. All this kind of phenomenon. It seems to link through history, and it's sometimes it's either appearing as something else, or it's the same thing, or appearing as the same thing, and just being perceived as something else. That's kind of what it seems to be.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I mean, I know one woman who she had heard this is in Glasgow. She had this strange noise, on the roof, and she went upstairs, and then this beam of light came down, and this being came down and sort of stood in front of her, and to her, it was a religious experience, because she described this person as looking like Jesus, Jesus-like type of clothes on, this kind of stuff, But you're never quite sure, I mean, was she so religious that she wanted to see that kind of figure appearing? I mean, if she'd been interested in someone else, would some other kind of figure appeared? But I mean, again, I mean, you get this strange combination of events, where the UFOs get mixed up with other types of phenomena. and which makes it doubly puzzling.
It's a puzzling case. It's a puzzling kind of aspect to any. You know what I mean? Let alone you maybe have a UFO sighting with a Bigfoot or something like that together. You know what I mean? It's hard to tell one of these stories, let alone link the two of them into one story and be perceived as rational or insane. You know what I mean? At the end of the day.
Yeah.
So out of all the kind of cases you've looked at as well, like I know obviously that's kind of perplexing cases. Most of them are anyway. What ones have kind of scared you or played in your mind the most?
Well, I mean ones that have played on my mind is the period I spent investigating the medium Ray Todd, which I wrote a book about alien spirits. Spent a couple of years visiting him, almost every week, every couple of weeks, and recording all the seances. And in Alien Spirits, I give an account of all the seances I had, of what I saw in those experiences. And with him, I saw all these strange faces would come through, which you could see quite clearly come over his face. And this included alien spirits as well, spirits that had the appearance of alien faces. And this kind of thing I found really... Oh, there we are. Sorry.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I can see it now, yeah. Sorry, I don't know.
Aye, so just getting back to, I'll show you, getting back to the book.
Oh, yes. Alien spirits, yeah, you got it.
Got it there, yeah.
So you know exactly what I'm talking about. But, I mean, all these things that I saw there, these alien spirits, I mean, plus all the things that happened there, the room would practically disappear, Ray would practically disappear in a kind of white blob. And there was so much went on. And, I suppose of all the experience I've had, it was that really preyed on my mind a lot, because it's difficult to, come to terms with the fact that you could experience that with another person in an ordinary room.
Yeah.
And that all these alien things were coming through. It was really very, very strange. And it really made you think about the universe. I mean, you can say it was common sense. If there are alien entities out there, well, I mean, if we've got souls or spirits, then, they must have it too. And I think that was something that really made me think about the kind of universe that we live in,
Mm-hmm. No, it's a strange case, and it's definitely quite strange. You know what I mean? Mm. And I've heard it before, the actions of it and stuff. And but it's definitely intriguing. Mm. Has it indirectly affected you from it? So from that, I mean, is there anything you'd find that maybe, like from that case, if it disturbed you, affected you, not just actually when it happened, but you think it maybe affected you after, or in another place or situation? You get these things, and obviously you get, like, for example, the hitchhiker example of that, which would, like, some entity would kind of latch onto somebody, or it maybe try to cause, like, trickster or issues or whatever else. Or have you ever had anything like that? I can imagine doing all the kind of different investigations you've done, that you would come across some strange cases and that, and it's the kind of thing you hear time and time again with these things.
Well, I've certainly come across folk who've been, had problems with poltergeist activity, and actually, poltergeists, actually trying to invade their body and such like. Those kind of things are disturbing, because you do think, well, somebody can be, if you like, physically affected in that way. I mean, if somebody's, for example, there's a bloke I was investigated, and that was through in Glasgow, and lots of he'd been followed by this poltergeist, effectively, and loads of things had happened in his house, and he'd had messages through and all this kind of stuff. And eventually, this kind of creature, which he described, looked like an electrical, that's what he said, it looked like an electrical kind of creature, or electric current or something like that. Mm-hmm. Eventually this creature actually tried to get inside his body. I spent a fair amount of time with him. And you can say to yourself, well, is that going to follow me home? But I've never had that experience.
It's like bring your work home. That's another theory of bringing your work home with you.
But I've never actually. I mean, I've heard people saying they've had that happen to them. That they've had that experience. Been somewhere, had an experience, and they've gone home. Yeah, and they found this whatever it is, entity or, whatever's causing it, has followed them home,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've had, women saying, it seems to be particularly women, but saying, they've had some energy try to get into bed with them,
Mm-hmm.
and, really quite frightened by, that's what I'm saying, frightened by these experiences, and also just making it up or anything.
Yeah.
They're frightened, they have that feeling, and so, you can, if you like, you can maybe get into that situation where it preys on your mind, but all I can say is that I've never had, once I've been there and investigated something, I try to shut it off a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had a problem with anything following me back or anything, as you were, preying on my mind to the extent that I've been physically affected.
Mm-hmm.
I've had my attitude affected by experiences,
Yeah.
But I've never been physically or...
Any time have you ever thought about not investigating, because all these type of things can prey in your mind or that as well? We've seen what's almost like kind of overthinking a lot of stuff, you know what I mean, because of what's out there. Is anything like that ever, you ever came to any conclusion, maybe thinking like, stop investigating because of anything like that? Or is it or you always had the yearn to either keep going and keep finding out what's out there?
Yeah. I think you can overthink things. Yeah, I think you can easily let it prey in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say I've never been, involved in something. People they say strange creatures,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, and they've had lots of odd encounters in a house. Like somebody saying, stuff like even like crucifixes spinning around in the house, and they tell you this kind of thing. Yeah, obviously, it can be slightly disturbing. You have to think, wait, hold on a minute. But I've never been put off doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe because I was brought up with...
I think having an education in the paranormal start off was probably put you in good stead for it.
It's always, it's always been part of it. There's always been there. So, I've sort of got used to it. But I never take it for granted. I don't think I ever say to myself, there'll never be a situation where I'm going to be so scared that I don't want to carry on doing it. I think,
Yeah.
you have to kind of keep an open mind about things, and that's the main thing, because people tell you things which they may be overreacted to, maybe something's happened, and then they start believing, everything that happens in a house is a poltergeist, or everything, maybe just glanced at the side and thought they've seen somebody walk, you get all that. So you have to be careful that people aren't just overreacting because of something that's happened, or you get people seeing all the lights in the sky, which can be explained, away, and kind of build it up into something bigger. But I don't very rarely encounter people who are sort of making anything up. I think most people who've had an odd experience, certainly believe they've had an odd experience. And so, therefore, when people come to you and with an account of what's been going on, always listen to it and try to find out what's actually happened.
Do you find that it's like a relief for some people to actually tell somebody?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah, I think that's right, yeah. I think because people, are concerned that they're not going to be taken seriously, they're going to be laughed at, something disturbing's happened. So, yeah, a lot of people find that it's helpful, like speaking to me, people got a real interest in, investigating the supernatural. Yeah, I've certainly had that a lot of times from people.
Was there any area within the paranormal that you were drawn to more? So you maybe have like the kind of spirit side or whatever, or as we were talking before about, either you think it's just a big melting pot of everything, or is there any kind of area, like some people maybe prefer looking at kind of UFOs, and some people prefer looking at like maybe demonology and stuff like that. I know like when I'd been always looking into paranormal, was mainly to do with UFOs, and then you end up, and it kind of digressed into a lot of other stuff because a lot of it kind of links, was that kind of the same for yourself?
Well, I started off from being interested, it was in ghosts and poltergeists I originally got interested in, and from that, obviously, I met people that had, UFO experiences and so on. And I was also interested in, what kind of Earth mystery sort of things, ley lines and all that kind of stuff, and dowsing and and the whole nature spirit thing. So I mean, basically, I've had quite a wide interest because, as you say, I mean, they seem in some way which is difficult to work out, but I mean, you have that feeling that somehow all these things do have a link. I mean, the link is obviously, as I've said, the supernatural. So there is a link there, but how you can drill that link down to something a bit more concrete is, that's hard to, that's hard to see. But I mean, I've got a broad interest in, basically because I've been interested in it for so long, and you come across other times. You said demonology and witchcraft and all that kind of. And all those areas, when you think of the supernatural, it covers quite a lot of aspects, so some people, as you say, specialise in things, but I sort of take an overview of what's been going on because I find them all, really quite interesting. Well, really interesting, I mean, fair enough, some, obviously you can't be delved deeply into everything. There's just not enough time to do it.
No, that's it. No, there's no.
try to focus on some things, Otherwise, it's enough there for 100 lifetimes.
Totally, yeah. Do you think, as an area, do you think Scotland's got a high number of paranormal cases?
Oh yeah, oh God, yeah. Well, you think of all the stuff, the ghosts, the poltergeists, the UFOs, the Loch monsters, and the nature spirits, and goodness knows what else. Yeah. I mean, think of all the UFO sightings, the population of 5.5 million or something. There have been a lot of UFO sightings. By comparison, in terms of our population and the ghosts, it's puzzling as to why there is so much activity or reported activity in Scotland. And, I don't know, but one possibility is this window into other dimensions. Possibility, where Scotland just seems to have more kind of windows into, if you like, other universes or something like that. That might, I mean, okay, it's a speculative explanation, but I mean, it's not an explanation that is completely out with, what some scientists are saying these days. So I do believe it's a possibility,
And that's it as well for all the reported cases. It's the amount of cases that go past that are unreported. You know what I mean? It must be phenomenal. The amount of cases that are unreported.
Absolutely, because I mean, I get people telling me about UFO sightings I had 20, 30, 40 years ago. I mean, stuff comes up which is, really quite. Well, it's not really possible to actually investigate anymore because it's gone and they've had this experience. But it's still interesting to have that report, because you build up a picture of activity. I mean, one thing you've learned is that there's been a continuous period of UFO activity in Scotland, stretching back. But it just didn't come up at the time,
I know, it's. I suppose we even looking back at some. Although you could go to investigate them, at least you could link it to other cases or other sightings and stuff like that. So we go to another question that you were kind of getting to as well, but window areas. Do you think within Scotland as well, there's window areas where things happen more within, like, Scotland as a whole? Obviously, you get a lot of sightings and reports and stuff paranormal all over the place, but you see there's more places that are more prevalent in areas in Scotland that they get more cases than others.
I mean, I think there's a sort of even distribution. I mean, I think if you take the UFO stuff. I mean, obviously in some areas there's been a more intense level activity. I mean, like Bonnybridge, obviously. A case in point where there's a lot of activity in the 1990s, and then down in Dumfriesshire, there was a lot of UFOs reported in the 1970s. And then, even in East Kilbride, again, going back 20 years, shall we say, there was so when you get kind of areas where there's for a period was quite a bit of intense activity, and then it kind of moves on to somewhere else. But I think, I mean, ghost-wise, that's hard to quantify, because, I mean, everywhere you go, I mean, there are ghosts,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know how many haunted pubs there are, whether that's, I don't know what that's to do with, but I mean, you get haunted pubs, haunted hotels, haunted houses.
Ghost tours in Edinburgh.
Yeah, I know, that's right. So, I mean, it's hard to quantify all the ghost activity, because, so many have been reported from all over the place,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, probably about every second house in Scotland's seen a ghost at one point or another,
Mm-hmm.
all the castles and everything. So it's hard to quantify the ghosts. I mean, the UFO, I mean, I did make an effort to quantify when I wrote that UFO Scotland. I did make an attempt at the time to quantify where UFO sightings were. And at that time, Glasgow was a lot lower than you would have expected population-wise, while Lothians, Edinburgh and that, was actually a lot higher. So, I mean, but what the explanation for that is, I just don't know. I just don't know whether it's because people hadn't reported, UFO sightings, or whether I'd missed a lot of UFO sightings, and somebody else had picked them up or something. It's hard to be sure, but certainly some areas, just on the UFO stuff, which I think, recently more people have been investigating, obviously, the last 30 years, more people have investigated and reported. I think you can build up a picture of where there's been particular hotspots,
Yeah.
which is possibly this window thing. Otherwise, I mean, I'm just, somebody will say, why on earth would UFOs, go to Bonnybridge, when they could, land on the White House lawn? And it's a fair point. But, I mean, the only answer is, well, yeah, okay, that's a fair point. But, people are reporting a lot of UFO sightings in particular areas, whether or not, they go and land on the White House lawn. So, I mean, there's something strange going on, and it doesn't at times seem logical, But, on the other hand, people do have all kinds of completely strange experiences. They see all kinds of strange entities, and, I don't think that can just be dismissed.
In your kind of broad time doing it, do you find that it goes through cycles or like flaps? Like you maybe get time scales where you'll get a lot of accounts and it'll die down, or a lot of kind of paranormal encounters or even UFO cases, and then it'll kind of die down a bit and then it'll start rising. Or do you find that like it goes through like a flap or a cycle?
Yeah, I mean, I think the UFOs are the classic example, of things going through flaps. I mean, absolutely. I mean, you've had periods where there have been a lot of sightings reported, periods when there have not been a lot of sightings reported. Now, I've emphasised the word reported, because UFO sightings are down to people telling somebody, that they've had a UFO sighting. And it may well be that those periods where it looks like there was gaps or a lot less sightings, people just didn't report it to anybody for whatever reason, So you can never be 100% sure even about UFO flaps, but there does seem to have been a really intense period in the 1990s, when there were, in general, a lot more UFO sightings reported in Scotland. Stuff like ghosts, I mean, again, I think, as I said, it's hard to quantify some of these things, because, there are constant ghost reports in the papers, or, people often say they've seen something. So, I mean, I think that's harder to actually work out, because I think there's just simply been so many ghost sightings over such a long period of time.
Have you any theories on why some people perceive paranormal events more than others?
I mean, yeah, I think that is, absolute puzzle. I mean, I absolutely don't know. I mean, a lot of people, just go back to the UFO thing just for a minute. I mean, a lot of people, maybe just have a one-off UFO sighting, and, classic, obviously Bob Taylor's encounter. I mean, that was the only UFO that he saw, no matter how intense it was. That was the only time he ever had a UFO experience. But then, on the other hand, you get mediums, who can contact spirits of the dead, or, regularly see spirits of the dead. So, I mean, there must be some kind of attunement taking place there, if they're having these experiences, So, I mean, maybe sometimes people are just, are born with that. I mean, I don't think I could sort of, do that spontaneously. I mean, I've seen it through mediums, but I mean, I've never spontaneously, had that experience. And I think that's probably true for most people. So, I mean, I guess the answer to that, is that some people are attuned to things, and it's possible when somebody like, say, Bob had that experience for maybe for a short period, he became attuned to something, that, as he said, was out of this world. So I think there must be something going on there, which for, in some people comes back regularly, and for other people it's maybe just a one-off or a two-off event.
So you find it now where there's even been cases where there's maybe a group of people and some people can see it and other people can't see it, or one person can see it and the other person can't, but then they'll be checking on different cameras and different types of technology, and then the technology picks it up. For example, like an infrared camera, or like night vision, or such like. So it's given a bit of credence to people who are actually seeing things, you know what I mean? So they're actually coming up on some of the technology we've got these days.
Yeah. No, that's true.
And some of the things I always think as well, when if you've got a belief in this, and then if you had any doubt, and then you go back to if you go back now even to like the 2017 events that came out and stuff, the Tic Tac and all that, you know what I mean? It's been played to death a wee bit that, right? But it's you still go back to that. Well, they're seeing that. Pilots have seen that. It's recorded. It's on every different type of sensor they've got, and they actually came out and said, right, they're up there. We don't know what they are. So you bring it back to that, then you're right. I'm being rational here. You know what I mean? Like you could. That's kind of way I can think now. You know what I mean? Have you ever kind of doubt yourself in any sense? Like if something that maybe you'd seen, or something maybe even believe in a story, well, you bring it back to that and say, well, what's happening there? I mean, and they're recording it and they're seeing it, and there's that much evidence these days as well, and on everything.
So what were what experiences have you had then, Chris?
It's probably one of the strangest cases. This was never even told that much out with the family. It's one of the ones that stuck in my mind because I know it happened. I didn't see it. It was my mum and dad that seen it. They were totally rational people. They stayed in a normal, semi-detached council house, ex-council house, whatever it was, in Armadale. The house was a strange house, and the fact that I can remember, to me, what I could remember, then actually I'd recently called my sisters and stuff, and I was getting a wee bit updating some other things that happened in the house. So I'm the youngest of 4 siblings, and I've got 3 older sisters. In the house, the dogs and cats used to see something. So they would get their hackles up and stuff like that, and they would be either hissing, or the dog would barking, or they'd be, or either cowling away for something, or they could see something. So they'd maybe in the living room looking about at something that was there. So that was happening quite a lot. You know what I mean? On occasion, my dad was a lorry driver, so he left on like a Monday morning, and he wasn't back until the Friday night. He was a long distance lorry driver, so you can imagine you've got 4 young kids in the house, and like strange things happening, and then maybe blown into proportion. So you could easily rationalise some of these things. You know what I mean? And through time, we did rationalise them and didn't dwell on all that stuff. That was kind of one thing, the dog and the cat and all that kind of stuff. And then one other thing that happened where my sister came home from school. She was 15, and she was either doing the dishes or she was at the kitchen sink getting a glass of water or something like that. And the radio was playing in the background. There was nobody in the house. My mum was out working, and the rest of us were out just at school. She'd come home from school early. Something grabbed her from behind.
Right.
So it grabbed her on the shoulder behind, and she turned around. There was nobody there. She thought it was my sister or my mum or something like that, giving her a fright, and actually grabbed her. So she turned around, and she basically panicked, and she went outside, and she sat in the step outside until people came home. So my mum came home and asked her what had happened, and she basically told her the story. And my mum told her it happened to her a few times in the house, but she didn't tell anybody because the fact that she didn't want to seem crazy or scare anybody as well. So it happened to mum a few times. On occasion in the house as well, the back door used to go. So we had big high hedges, fences, and gates and stuff. And the back handle used to go all the time, as if somebody was turning the handle. And the strange thing is, you could actually hear the spring in the handle going first before you'd actually see it, right? So that happened on occasion. So you could see it. We got to the point where You'd open the door, but nobody there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I go to the point where my mum phoned the police a few times. We thought we had a prowler, right? And we never found anybody. And even to the point when I was a wee bit older, I must have been 10 at the time, or 11, and somebody had tried the door, and we were there, and I grabbed the door, and I opened the door, and there was nobody there. So another story within the house is my mum let out a scream one day. It was like her and my sister in the house. My sister had a room that was downstairs, next to the living room, and my mum let out a scream. So my sister went in to see what had happened, and what had transpired is my mum said there was something black came out the floor and then disappeared into the wall. Right. So that was that. You know what I mean? And it's just quite a kind of funny feeling about the house, right? But the other story, there was one other than that. So my sister was in that room when she was slightly older. She had a boyfriend staying over. The boyfriend got up in the morning and said, like, I've had the strangest dream, right? And he said, but I swear it wasn't a dream, but it must have been a dream. So he woke up, right? And he said he seen, like, and it was like, I'm thinking back to the kind of goblin-like creature that you were talking about, right? He said it was like that. It was like a troll-like ugly thing standing in the open wardrobe, right? There was like a kind of a walk-in type wardrobe, like the old type used to get. He said it was standing there, and then it transformed into a taller man, right? And then disappeared, right? And disappeared. So he relayed that story, but it was down to a dream, right? So that's what he's saying. So he rationalised that as a dream story. Well, my sister actually told me that story, and then when I was asking her to relay some of the conversations and stuff like that, what was going on. So my mum and dad now, they're dead now, so I couldn't kind of go back and ask them about the story, but my mum did relay some of the story to me when I was younger. The story I can remember what transpired is I was out, must have been 11 or 12 at the time. I came in, my mum and dad were kind of bickering a wee bit when I left. And when I came back in, it was I can remember it being dark because it must have been like winter time or autumn time, because it was like quite dark when I came back in the house at night, you know what I mean? And I was out playing and stuff. So I came in expecting to still be kind of arguing or bickering, and they were actually looking round the living room for something. So I got ushered off to my bed or whatever, and I found out what had happened. My mum told me what had happened, my sisters told me as well. So it was they were middle of a really heated argument, and the living room door was closed. And the living room, if you can imagine, like the type of doors you get where it's not a handle, it's like a spring-loaded ball, and that, and it was in a wee hole. So you could push the living room door open, right? But you need to give it a good shove because there was like a kind of thick carpet on the other side, right? So they were in the living room, heated argument. The living room door burst open, right? And a black thing came in the living room. And as it came in, my dad actually turned around and thought it was a dog, and he was going to say, he turned to say, get out to the dog, but it wasn't. This thing came in, it travelled round his legs at knee height, right, round his legs, shot across the living room, right, and then it disappeared, right, and they were out, when I came in, they were up looking for this thing, and they didn't know what it was. The dog was locked in the kitchen, the cats were outside, and they didn't know what it was, right. It was like, and my mum, I can remember my mum's relaying. One of the things my dad had said, he'd said, it never had a head. It never had a head. And that was the kind of story I knew. It was like really, really strange. I know what happened because it was like, my mum and dad were quite rational people. They weren't like people or anything like that. And they never probably told a lot of people about the story. I know my dad wouldn't have told anybody about it because he was like a total skeptic. And it totally freaked him out. So that was as far as I knew that bit of the story, and it was interesting. I was telling somebody else's story. It was another podcast, and I was just talking about the story. And he said, he put the question. He said, "I wonder if your dad seen something different for your mum." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, he said it never had a head." And I said, "All right, I don't know." And he said, "I wonder if," I said, I can't ask them because the two of them are dead." So it was after that story. There was probably a space of about a week or 2 weeks, and I done the interview with Andy Swan again in Armadale with the UFO encounter, and he stayed round the corner for us.
Oh, did he?
Aye. So I knew about the story and stuff like that. So the interesting thing for that was when I was talking to Andy and during the podcast, he'd said he'd seen a few, he had a few more sightings quite recently. So the sightings I think he's seen like it was like a white sphere, a orb type thing, with something going round it, and he took a video of it. He's got a video on his phone, and he'd seen something else, and he stays up in that kind of vicinity now. And the funny thing is, after I put the podcast out and stuff, I got somebody coming back to me, and they said I've also seen something as well in Armadale recently, and it was in the same area that he was talking about, and I think her words were it was quite unnerving. You know what I mean? That's what she said. She stayed across the road from where I stayed, and it wasn't until a week after I kind of thought I'm going to contact her because she was my mum's best friend to find out if she knew the story. Right? So I asked her about the story, and she knew about the story. So the story goes, which is a bit more kind of additional onto it, right? Which is it was quite mad, but she said that she knew the story quite well, and she goes, she only went in the house once after that. After it happened, right? Her, my mum, and a few others, I went to what was it called? Like a clairvoyant or something in Glasgow. And my mum never got taken, so she kind of organised for the women to come back to the house on a later date, and they were going to get a few people round and stuff. At this point, this happened. My sister was out the bottom room now, and it was a dining room type thing. So when I think she said the clairvoyant or medium was for Helensburgh. That's what she said. She was from Helensburgh. She was really good, and she came to the house. My mum met her at the front of the house, and on arriving at the house, she said she got like a bad feeling straight away. And it was the day we had like 2 rowan trees out the front of the house, right, and then we had like a rowan tree at the back of the house, like in a kind of triangle and all that kind of stuff. And she had a funny feeling about some part of the house. So anyway, she's doing the readings. And when it got to my mum, the medium told her that my dad was having an affair, right? She told her the story about my dad was having an affair, to the point we're going into kind of some detail and stuff. And it was a good few days later my dad came back, and then my mum confronted him, and that was the night. Okay, so that was the night that she confronted my dad. So that had happened. But the story was this thing came in the living room, right? It was around my dad's legs. And she said it was on the couch, and it was moving on the couch that fast they couldn't discern what it was, and then it disappeared. And then later on, they said there was a bad smell coming from the room next door. I mean, they went next door, they seen this thing that was like a creature type thing in the corner, and then it disappeared, and it was like the thing that the guy had seen before. Absolutely mad story. I mean, totally mad. You know what I mean? But it's
that is a fascinating story. Yeah, that is really fascinating. Have you written that down?
I've got it recorded and stuff. I've never really spoken about the story. It's no out there in a sense. I think I'd posted it to Alison once and told her it just in a kind of message. But it's harder to relay something in a kind of written down message, and it is you didn't get a good explanation yet. I should actually write it down a bit better. In that sense, but I've recorded that. But it was just like, for me, it was one of the kind of strangest stories that stuck in my mind, for the fact that I knew my mum and dad well, and they weren't the type of people to fabricate anything, and they weren't the type of people. Well, listen, I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and it's been really, really good talking to you.
Yeah, no, it's been great speaking to you, and hearing your stories, your accounts as well. It's been really good.